Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on Power BI for Actuaries, Transforming Data Analysis with Advanced Tools. My name is Josh Lauer, and I'm excited to share with you today how Power BI can enhance our actual analyses and decision-making processes. It's going to be a very packed session, so it's likely you'll need to go back and rewatch some of it. However, my goal today is to give you some details and tips and tricks that I wish I had known when I first started in Power BI, which in turn can hopefully shorten your ramp-up period with this tool. Today, we're going to explore how Power BI's advanced features can be applied to a life insurance dataset to uncover valuable insights. The dataset I'm going to walk through is a simulated dataset that I constructed, and so the results as far as premiums and agent behavior and all of that, none of it is correlated to an actual dataset that exists. It's simply constructed from some Python code that I wrote. And so the objectives, though, in Power BI are what I hope that you take away. And those are some general Power BI features we're going to cover, advanced calculations using DAX measures, interactive insights through dynamic visuals and slicers, AI-powered analytics for deeper understanding, and various custom visuals and storytelling techniques to communicate findings effectively. So my presentation today is not going to be done within PowerPoint. It's going to be done within Power BI. But first, I have a couple slides that I need to go through. The first one is on antitrust. And the next one is thank you to our conference sponsors you'll see here on the screen. And of course, remember that the views and opinions expressed in these sessions are only those of the speakers, being myself in this case, and don't necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employers, Full-Stack Actuarial, the conference sponsors, or any other entity that I may be associated with. With that said, we can go ahead and get into our Power BI session today. And for that, I'm going to turn off my webcam so we can focus on the content on my screen. Here we go. Now, when you begin a Power BI project, you open up the application, you'll be greeted with this screen here talking to you about importing data. You'll get several different pieces. Import data from Excel, SQL Server. Of course, since this is a Microsoft product, they're going to suggest Microsoft products as the sources for your data feeds. However, you'll see at the top here, the Get Data and the ribbon, there's several sources. You can click more, and the world really opens up to you as far as different data sources that Power BI can connect to. And then, of course, you have any OData feeds and things like that. So a lot of data source connection capabilities. Another component that's really important with Power BI is going to be the data preparation and modeling. That's probably about 85% of the work, to be honest. The other components here are going to be centered on creating great visuals, good storytelling, and all of that. But the data preparation, cleaning, all that stuff is going to be the biggest importance from here. So we will go to our dashboard here, but before we dive into the data here, let's talk about the data model first. So you'll see here with the data model that I have on my screen, I have a data set called life insurance data and then a date table. We'll go over each of those in more detail. First, for the life insurance data, we're going to open up the query editor. So I connected my data to the CSV I generated from Python. And we will go through, I'm going to open up the advanced editor. And this kind of looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but it's really not that complicated. You'll see here I'm pointing to a specific folder and file here, it's CSV, how many columns it has. There's also options for specific delimiters. As you see here, my file is pipe delimited. And then there are several different steps. I promote the headers in the file, change the type, etc. So as we walk through the data that's connected here, you'll see my source, and then I promote the headers. The headers now come up. I change some data types here. For date fields, I call them dates. For integers, I call them integers, etc. I rename a few columns here. For example, I didn't have spaces when I generated the column names. I tend to not like to do that in programming, and then I actually make the column names what they should be, the business language within Power BI. You could do whatever is up to your own preference though. And then I changed some types, rename some columns, etc. So what I showed in here, the advanced editor, is part of Power Query. So if you're familiar with that within Excel, you can create Power Queries and build data models in there. It's the same exact thing. So if you wanted to do the data transformations within Power BI and migrate some stuff from Excel, you could just kind of copy paste it, honestly, into the advanced editor in here, and it should work. The other component that I'm going to talk about here is the relationships that you will build within the data model. So if I back out of here, this is a pretty simple one in that I have one big data set that has all of my data. This is going to be some life insurance in-force data that we'll see here. And then I also created a date table. Now a date table is going to be great in Power BI because it allows you to take advantage of several different functions. So there's time series functions. For example, if you want to calculate year-to-date values very easily, do month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, that type of stuff is very easy. And then you're also able to have kind of one-stop shop for slicers, which we'll go over. And they're basically filters, but there's some differences. But you can select particular years or date ranges or things like that, and it works really great. So if there are multiple date or pieces of data in your Power BI file, you're going to be able to filter so long as they have a relationship with the date table. Now, a couple things about these relationships. That pulled up some of the extra detail there for the table. The relationships here, so if I click on my date table and I click on the relationship, you'll see one is a solid line, others are dotted lines. And that's because when you create a relationship, there's one relationship that's active. So when you set up slicers, for example, in Power BI to filter on a particular date, you'll see here, I'm tying this to the application date. It's primarily going to filter the data set of the life insurance data based on application date, but you'll see here I'm also doing some other joins, date on date of birth, for example, etc. And these secondary relationships, you can use them. There's certain syntax called use relationship that you can create in DAX, and DAX is just the programming language within Power BI. It's very similar to writing Excel formulas. But you can create these other relationships because in my example here, I have one big table that has several date fields. And when I want to filter or look at data in a different way, how do I know which date field to use? Well, the first relationship I build will be the primary, and then the others are going to be inactive relationships. So if I click on them, you'll see the yes turns to no, etc. And so date tables are great because you can put in things, for example, bank holidays or weekend flags and things like that, and allow you to do a lot of different data analyses. So I won't dive too deep into date tables, but they are a great function of Power BI. You'll see here I can construct it within Power BI. I'm creating a calendar from 2010 all the way to 2030, and then I'm just having year, month number, month name, etc. And you could add and make this even more detailed if you desire. But date tables are going to be great. Like I said, it allows you to take advantage of time series functions and do some other really neat functionality within Power BI. The other component that I'm going to talk about in here is the table view on the side. So we loaded in our data. This is really great if you want to just get a quick glance at your data. So if I have my date table here, you'll see all the dates here ranging from 2010 all the way down. So I'm not going to scroll through the whole list for you here, but you'll see my year, month number, month name, etc. It's a great way to make sure that your data is looking the way that it is or that you want it to. And then for my life insurance data, I can do the same thing. And so if I click on gender, for example, I can see, I got just male and female. It's great. Issue ages, I can see my issue ages ranging from age 18, for example, to age 70. And I can kind of dive into that detail here and filter the data. For example, if I wanted to see how many people are married, I could look at that, or look at everybody age 18 and issue age. And so it's better in this view, in the table view, to do that, because if you try to filter in the model view where we were in the query, for example, if I go to edit query, it's going to actually filter your data set and add a step to your applied step. So you don't want to actually filter in here unless you intend to filter your data set. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you want to explore it, you could explore it in the table view here. Otherwise, just go ahead and create some charts and analyze it that way. Now, we're going to go to our report view here. And so there's several different report tabs here. We're going to walk through all of them together in detail. A couple things to kind of keep in mind when designing. So what I'm going to walk through here, I followed some best practices in some areas, other areas I didn't, in order to illustrate some points. But what you see on here is a demographics report. So each report tab in here is going to have different themes for them. So we have demographics, some premium analysis, some claims analysis, agents view, some drill through capabilities, some Q&A, and then a few other tabs that I'm going to talk through regarding templates. So when you're designing, some concepts to keep in mind is you don't want to overcrowd, you don't want to be redundant. Simple is better. Add complexity when necessary. And so you'll see this view here. This is probably one of the busier reports that I'm going to have in here. But you'll see here I have a very consistent view. I have my slicers on the left. I have some cards at the top, some KPIs that we look at, and then some charts, visuals right in the center. And you'll see that as we go through different report tabs in here, my slicers are all in all one area. They're synced, which means if I click on one, for example, I pick the year 2024, then that filter, that slicer I should say, carries over to all the other tabs. So it's generally best practice to sync them. If you, for example, you create this nice little view here on the left and you say, hey, I want to bring that over to my other tabs, it's actually pretty easy. I could just copy a slicer here, bring it over to the premium tab. If it didn't have it, I could hit paste and look at that. It added the slicer here and it asked me if I want to sync them or not. I'm going to exit out though and actually not sync that slicer. And the nice part is, let's say year wasn't on here at all. Now if I paste it, it'll paste it in the same place that I had it on my previous report tab. So this takes care of some of the alignment. I'm going to go ahead and sync it here now. But that takes care of some of the alignment. So if you spend a lot of time creating one good kind of report sheet and you're just like, gosh, I want to carry this format over, it's very easy just to copy and paste. So it's very friendly from that perspective. And so this goes into a component here of designing templates. So with templates in Power BI, you can create specific template files. So let's say at your company, you have certain colors that you use and things like that, or maybe certain font types that you have an affinity for. Well, you can create a Power BI template to do that. And then not just that, you can also create some wireframing. So for example, these tabs here to the right, you'll see I created some wireframing here where I have some blank canvases. So you'll see here I have my slicers and then some blank canvases here. And that will allow users to just pick up a Power BI template file and then start building right away and then not have to focus as much on the layout, making sure they got the colors right, the fonts, etc. All that's taken care of in the background. So it's a great thing to kind of research how to do the templates because you can put your company colors in there, whatever you want. Then you'll see here I have a vertical, splitting it down the middle, vertical offset. So I just kind of created these wireframes for my company. So when people kind of go in, they can start building right away. You'll see cards vertical. This one I use quite heavily because I can put some KPIs here at the top, and then I can fill in these blank canvases here. Now, these are not visuals, obviously, that you see on here. These are just effectively placeholders. And so it's kind of an exercise of wireframing, if you will, where I can then take these where these placeholders are. If I wanted to, for example, add a table, I can click the table. I can align it right over my visual here, and then I can drag and snap it to the edge, and look at that, it fills it out. And then by the time you're done populating this template, it looks like that you did a great job with organizing it and all of that. And what this also does within your company is it provides a standardization for reports. And so what happens if you don't have the standard, you could have several different areas of your company, creating different Power BI reports, which is great. But then the flip side of that is if all of them are kind of unique in that they have different styles and that they're using, then you have to spend, as a user, you kind of have to spend a little bit of time when you go into the report understanding how the user laid out the data, as opposed to with templates, you kind of know, all right, yep, my slicers are on the left. If I have KPIs, it's going to be at the top. And there's just some things that if your company has a template like this, that you can kind of just, I don't want to say take for granted, but take as a given. And then you could spend, again, more time diving in because you kind of understand how it's laid out. And so those are just some best practices that I like to keep in mind, and we've designed some templates at Fortitude. So let's go ahead and dive into our first report tab here. So like I said, this is dummy data that I have here. And so with that being said, I have about 50,000 policies, but in the year 2024, I've selected, we've issued about 48,000 average premium, and you'll see some other metrics here at the top. So these are KPIs, or key performance indicators. So this type visual is just your card visual up here. So I have the card selected, and then you'll see when you select a card, I got a little green check mark on my life insurance data, which that tells me all the data sources that are utilized in that visual. So if I click down here, you'll see here that total policies is the only one that is used, and this is the measure. And look at this, this is pretty simple. I'm just counting the policy IDs to get this total amount. And because I have a slicer on here, I'm able to see just for 2024 what those policies are. And then similarly for 2023, I can do that as well. So I change my slicer, I'm able to update the cards. So now, kind of a question is, why choose slicers over filters? Well, filters you'll see here are on the right, and I have them hidden. So you can hide the entire filter pane. So if you publish this internally to like a Power BI service or whatever, these filters will not be visible, only the slicers. Now, there's a few reasons why I like slicers over filters. One of them is, and this is probably the biggest reason, is because your filters, if you have, for example, you're filtering on a particular policy type or year, what happens is if you create a measure and you want the measure to be shown in a particular visual, and you want that visual to ignore your filter, because let's say maybe you want to view a quarter's worth of data for reserves, but you also want a visual that is a time series. So maybe you show the reserves for the past 5 quarters, so you kind of have a relative basis to compare to. Well, if you use a filter, then it creates a lot of headaches with creating the right measures to ignore the filter so you can properly illustrate that data. And while you can do that with DAX code, it's complicated. And the way that I kind of like to work is why add complexity when you can start simple? And so this is why I like slicers, and let me show you why. So I have the year, for example. I can expand my ribbon at the top here, and I can go to Format and Edit Interactions. And then now I have my slicer selected. You'll see I get all of these little pop-ups on here. So I will select none, I can select none, for example, on this card up here for total policies issued, which means now this slicer will no longer control this visual. So if I select 2023, doesn't matter. 2024 doesn't matter, because I've chosen that this slicer will not affect this anymore. And so you'll see my 50,000 policies that are issued. Now if I click, hey, it should filter, which is the default, you'll see now I'm back to my 48,000. And so you can do this with any visual on your screen here. And so if I, for example, select this graphic, I'm able to then say, okay, I selected this. Now I can see what visuals it would affect. And then I can say, do I want it to filter or not? So for example, if I'm clicking in on this little portion of female non-smokers, I can whittle down all my other data sets accordingly. But then if I said, oh, I don't want you to actually adjust the top data set, then I can click none. And then when I click into here, it actually won't adjust it at all. And so those are a couple neat things with slicers. So I recommend them over the filters, and they can just be more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion. So we're going to head and turn off the edit interactions there. And so you'll see here a couple other KPIs, and then at the top here, total policies and average premium by issue age range. So I created a column called issue age range. So you can easily do that by right-clicking on your data, go to new column, and then you can input some DAX code. So you'll see here, I'm using a DAX code called a switch, which you'll see here, you can pass in an expression, a value. So I just say, hey, when it's true, and then I put in the different results and then an else. So it's kind of the last part. If you're familiar with if statements, it's kind of like this big chained if statement. So if this, then this, if this and this, and then the last part is kind of that else. And there's a 60 plus. So here I'm just looking at my life insurance data, issue age, And then, hey, if it's less than or equal to 29, then I put in this range, otherwise 30 to 39, and then 40 to 49, etc., all the way up to 60. So those are the issue age ranges in here. And then graphing that, you'll see here I have a bar chart with a line. So this is great. So this is the combo chart, where I can have both the bar chart, which corresponds to the primary y-axis, and then the line here, the average premium, which corresponds to the secondary axis. And so you'll see here, I have the line is going to be the average premium, then I have total policies, and then the issue age range is going to be my x-axis right here along the bottom. Next, we have a couple other visuals, so total policies by gender and smoking status. And so you'll see here, I have a legend that tells me yes or no. So no being the dark color for non-smokers, yes being the lighter blue, and then indicating the smoking status here. Then hovering over each visual that you build, you're going to get kind of a default for a tooltip. So you can easily turn these off. You can add features to them. So you have tooltips down here. You can add data fields that are not currently used in your visual, and they will show up on your visual here if you highlight over them. So that's something to kind of keep in mind there. And then with each visual, you're able to go in the visualizations pane here and customize a lot of different things. So here the legend, let's say if you didn't like it in the top left, you could say I want it in the top center. You can modify basically anything that you want with these visuals. So I encourage you to kind of play around a little bit with some of this for the different charts that you have. And then pie charts, I'm not very big on pie charts. There's probably only one time where they can be useful or relatively useful, and that's in this type of scenario, showing proportions when we don't have a lot of different categories. So for policy type, you'll see here we have term, universal life, and whole life. Term makes up the bulk of the in-force here. And so again, we're looking at your 2024 issues. And so we have 34,000 term policies and about 7K for the others here. And then the last part, this is kind of a fun one here, sum of premium amount by education issue age. You'll see here we have issue age as the x-axis down here at the bottom, then the sum of the premium amounts, and then we have a education level as the legend. So we have 5 different categories here, and so you'll see some interesting things. Again, this is just made up data, but you'll see here for the light blue, so bachelor's, and then we have high school here, that the steepness of the premium amounts that are paid, actually it's a steeper incline for those groups than, for example, for the doctorates here at the bottom. We'll see here that the premiums paid are there's a little bit of an increase as issue age increases, but not a ton. And so what we can do is we have all these visuals here on the chart or on the report page here. We can create what's called a smart narrative. So that is here on the lower right. And this is actually pretty easy. So smart narrative is going to be done right here on the right. You'll see the narrative component. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at all of the visuals that you have on the current report page, and it's going to generate a narrative about it. So you'll see here at 11,201, 20 to 29 year olds had the highest total policies and was 22.5% higher than the 50 to 59 cohort, which had the lowest total policies. So it puts together different narratives here. Female and smoking status of no made up 35% of total policies. And so if you click on what's underlined here, it'll actually show you, hey, how was this generated, this 35.23? It was automatically generated summarizing the highest total policies as a percentage of total policies, and then obviously for that particular cohort. So this can be pretty helpful to give you a quick digest. And then because as your data updates, for example, this smart narrative will also update. And so it's just a great way to kind of summarize in words some of the data that you see with the pretty pictures that you design on here. So let's hop over to premiums now and talk about some more details. We talked about the cards here in the top. One of the things that I mentioned is time series data. So we see one here for year-over-year premiums changed. So clicking on this, I have a field here. You'll see here I'm dividing. And so the divide function works like this, where I can take my numerator, put it in denominator, and then if I want alternate results, let's say it's a 0. So if it's something where you're dividing, you could be dividing by null, for example, you could have it default to be 0 instead, or blank. So you can do that. But here you'll see I'm dividing my premium amounts by, and then subtracting off previous year, and then dividing by previous year. Well, how do I get my previous year premiums? Let me go ahead and click on that. So you'll see here I'm using the calculate function here, which calculate is very, very powerful in that you can evaluate an expression in a context, so modified by filters. And so calculate can be one of the most confusing things in Power BI DAX, but if you begin to kind of understand how to use it, it's really powerful. So you'll see here, I'm just taking my total premium amount and I'm telling it, hey, look at the same period last year. And this is exactly why we create date tables, because this particular time series function will go ahead and say, hey, based on a current date that I'm looking at, compared to the same time last year, and then give me my year-over-year change. So you'll see what this number here is computing is the year-over-year premiums change, which is a substantial increase, over 3,000% increase. But that's one of the great things, like I said, about the time series functions, is that you're able to now do that type of analyses. Coming down to some of our other charts here, so you'll see here total premium amount by year and quarter. So now I break this out by quarters, and look, when I click on this visual here, I actually have 2 green check marks, one of them for my life insurance data, the other for my date table. I can actually just bring in, for my date table, my year and quarter, because I've created a relationship. And so because I've created a relationship, the data in my visual here knows exactly how to relate to my life insurance data, and so I can create these nice visuals, as opposed to needing to worry about creating one giant data set in life insurance data that has, the quarters and the years and everything in there. I don't need to. All I need to do is create a great date table, and then I can link it to my life insurance data and other data sets in here. And so you'll see now I have year and quarter put in here. So, and the order does matter, and so you'll see I have 2024 and then the quarters up here. I only have year 2024 selected, so we can see the 4 quarters. And we see, okay, quarter 2 ramping up, then quarter 1, then quarter 2, then we have quarter 3, and then all the way down to quarter 4. So we can kind of see this arcing pattern where quarter 3 we brought in the most premium, and we'll see our current in force. This number still matches, and comparing these premiums here, we have about 60 million in current year premiums, where before we had just 1.5 million, so pretty big increase there. Next, we're comparing premiums current year and prior year. So this is another way that you can kind of look at it. And so this is just, like I said, on the yearly basis. We could break this out by quarterly, etc. The world is really kind of at your fingertips here with how you want to construct these. So this one just is year over year. So if I highlight over the different bars, I see, 59 million here, which matches my KPI card at the top. And at the bottom here, I have previous year of 1.5 million. Now on these particular visuals, you can add data labels. So if I click in here, go to visualizations, and then I go to data labels here, you'll see I can turn them on. By default, it's going to put in what it thinks it should do. So here's the 1 million, here's the 59 million. You can change the formats of these numbers. You can change the position of them, all of that stuff on these data labels. So sometimes it makes sense to have these. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, sometimes I didn't always lay out things in the best way. So I want to quickly bounce back before I forget to this top visual, total premium amount by year and quarter. You'll see here, I have a nice title up here that Power BI actually generates it. So if you have fields kind of named as you would want them, it'll auto-generate titles. It may or may not be what you want it to be. In this case, it was. But you'll see here, I have a label on my y-axis for total premium amount. This is what I'm talking about with redundancy. If I tell the user this is total premium amount by year and quarter, what are they going to assume that my y-axis is? They're going to assume it's the total premium amount. So why am I telling them again that it's a total premium amount? This is, again, like I said, what I mean, getting rid of the redundancies. So I can click on this visual. I can say, hey, on my y-axis, I want to get rid of the title, and then go ahead and take it off. And so now this looks just a little bit better than it did before. Now, if I didn't have that title on here, and I said, you know what, I don't want to do chart titles. Maybe the way I like to design is just properly label my axes. Then I can go ahead and leave those on. And then I'm also going to take off the quarters here on the bottom, because looking at this, it's pretty obvious, even if I didn't have a title, that I'm looking at quarters. And so I'm going to go ahead in here as well, and my x-axis, and take off the titles here. So now that looks a little bit better. Okay, and then the last chart here on the bottom right, this is, again, I left in the y-axis label. This probably isn't needed because, again, I'm naming the chart well. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here and say, hey, for my y-axis, let's go ahead and take off that. And then the month name down here, I don't even like that it doesn't have a space between this. But again, we don't need this. And so I can go to my x-axis and take off the title there as well. And so you'll see here I have a total premium amount and a rolling 3-month average premium. So here's another thing that you can do is rolling averages. So obviously, especially if you're dealing with data that can have a high amount of variability, in a short time period, then you can smooth it out with some rolling averages. And so that's why you'll kind of see the lag here with how quick the slope on the rolling average goes, which is pretty intuitive. But then also as the premiums fall, you'll see the rolling average, delays as far as the steepness. So how did I do that? Well, rolling 3-month averages, if I click on my measure here, I'm going to expand the top, you'll see I'm bringing back our friend, the calculate function, and then dates and period. So this is, again, using another time series, reinforcing that, hey, why do I want a date table? It's because you can do fun things like this. And so you'll see here, I'm looking at the dates and then the max in the date table. And so that's going to be based on my filters. And then I just take off 3 months, and then that's how far it's going to roll back from that. And so it's intuitively named, and then you can see how it's constructed here. One part that I forgot to mention when constructing a date table is there's a marker that you can do at the top here. It's going to say mark as date table, which you'll see that's what I did here. And so if you want to make it an official date table, you can only have one. Then you mark it, and then it has to be a field in there, which is the date field, intuitively, that you select and say, hey, this is the unique field. It has to be a unique field, and so all the dates in here are unique because I'm using the calendar and date functions. And then you can mark it as a date table and take advantage of all those fun time series functions. And so something else that you can kind of keep in mind too, before we go to the next report, is that you'll hover over these charts and you'll see here too that there are ways to, you can do some different drill downs, but then there's focus mode. So if you're like, gosh, this rolling premium, it's a little tight for you, you can click focus mode and expand it out. And then now look at this. Now you get one whole big page just dedicated to this. You could easily go back to the report. Or you could say, hey, show this to me as a table, and then you'll get it in tabular format here as well. And then you can see the breakdown of the data. So let's go ahead and go back to the report, and we're going to navigate to our claims report side. So another fun report here. Again, all the slicers are the same here on the left. And I didn't go through all the details here, but I guess I can touch on a few. We mentioned the policy types. We have some features here for accelerated death benefit, return of premium. Instead of having null, where there isn't a policy feature, I just put none. So that's why that value is there. Marital status, we got a ton of different pieces here: divorced, married, single, widowed. You'll see this is a very rich data set. Probably a lot of you are wishing that you had access to all this type of data on your Inforce. I constructed it just for the fun of having all this data available here, but obviously in the real world, the data is typically not this clean or this this robust as far as the attributes that it contains. But I have smoking status, gender, and then cause of death if there was a death. In this case, if there was no death, it is blank. Hovering over it, you'll see that there. Otherwise, we have an accident, cancer, stroke, etc. for a cause of death. So when it comes to analyzing claims, there's ways to bring in custom charts into Power BI. And so you'll see here, you can hover over the ellipsis here and say, get more visuals. And then you can import visuals from a file, which I've actually never done. But get more visuals is what I've done for this. And then you'll see here, you can kind of search So what I have at the top here is a Sankey diagram or Sankey chart, and you'll see here that there's one by Microsoft. So great, that's probably the one I'm going to add in. Some of these you have to pay for, and so the Microsoft one you don't though. So I was able to kind of click in here and then add it in. And so it's pretty easy to do that. You can just click add and then it'll bring it in for you. And so the top here, so if I, for example, wanted to see how many people from my preferred where the claims were $500,000 to $1 million, I can hover over and see, oh, this is how many, 87. And you can kind of see the flow from preferred to there, where if I hover over the middle part in preferred, I can see, wow, 54 of them were over $1 million for claim, etc. And so you'll see here the amount in preferred. I don't have as many in preferred as I do maybe in standard or substandard, but you can see hovering over these, you can get different pieces on the tooltip and then where they ultimately ended up going here as well. So this is a custom visual that you can import that doesn't come in Power BI by default. But you'll see clicking on here, you put in your source, underwriting class, which is on the left. I have a destination, I have a claim amount group, and then count of policy IDs. So my claim amount group is again going to be another added custom column. And you'll see here, that's where you get this little FX component, as opposed to the calculator tells you it's a measure, where the FX tells you this is an added column. And so you'll see here, I'm just kind of creating different groupings in here and then doing that accordingly. And there's other ways to create groups in Power BI. I won't go through all of them, but one thing to kind of keep in mind in Power BI is that there's almost never just one way to do things. There's several ways, which is nice. So you can kind of pick the way that best suits you, and they tend to be use case dependent too at times. But that's where I go back to what I shared with you all at the beginning of this, is that start simple. If there's a really simple way to do it, that's great. People already know you're smart and you're clever, so there's no need to show them how clever you are with this. It just starts simple. That's the really impressive thing, is when you do it simply, and then you can kind of go from there. Now, a new graphic that I have here at the bottom is called Key Influencers, which you'll see is based on here. I select that visual, and then this is automatically going to analyze my data set. So what do I want? Well, I want you to analyze my claims because we're on the claims report. What do I want you to explain? I want you to look at all these different components and tell me which one leads to higher likelihood of a claim. So I tell you to analyze what influences claim to be yes or no. So I created the claim column. If they claimed, that's part of the data set. And so we'll see here, well, it automatically comes up with this, like I said. When smoking status is yes, that leads to a 2.5 times greater likelihood that there's a claim, is if they're a smoker. Well, also if they're old. Also, apparently, if they live in the state of Ohio, they're 1.6 times more likely. And then the issue age is 50 to 59. And interestingly enough, education level is a doctorate. So, like I said, these aren't necessarily correlated to anything in real life. It's a made-up data set. I tried to introduce some kind of fun things here, but try to make some of them intuitive. Like, yes, if you're smoking, there's a higher likelihood of your claiming. We kind of get the increased mortality from that. And then you'll see here, there's a graphic here on the right associated with it. So if I click the smoking status is yes, you'll see here, hey, here's the average, excluding the selected, and then with it, what it is, and then clicking on the issue age ranges, you'll see, oh, how 60 plus, and then 50 to 59 is up there, and then the other issue ages are a lot lower here. So this is a really neat chart here. Again, updates with your data. It's kind of got some AI on the back end of it. Can help save you some time from trying to build a ton of different visuals. And you could just go ahead and use the key influencers as well. And then there's also top segments as well. So you'll see here, clicking that, we found 6 segments, ranked them by percentage claim is yes and population size. So you can select it and see more details. So here for segment 1, the claim is yes, 4.6% chance. What makes up this segment? Well, it gives me all the detail here. The issue where 8 rages are not any of these values. Marital status is single, and smoking is yes. So single smokers who are old at the time of issue, they have the greatest likelihood of claiming. So that's intuitive. Some of the takeaways in this data set, like I said, are not. For example, being from Ohio, I don't know what being from Ohio has anything to do with increased mortality. Maybe those attending here from Ohio, can speak to that. But again, I'm not saying that that is true or not. It's just a little fun thing in the data set here. So we're going to go to agents, for example. So we have agents that help sell our business. We want to analyze them. Again, we have some KPIs at the top. I'm going to call out one of the new ones here, and this is going to be average customer satisfaction. So this is a gauge visual. And so this visual here is going to allow you to put in some values here. So I have the average customer satisfaction, and then I'm able to actually, within the formatting here, you'll see the gauge axis. I can put a minimum, a max, and a target. And when I do my target, I can change the color and I make it green. So maybe my target is, I want it to be an 8, for example. And so if I click on a particular agent here, you'll see, oh, this agent had a satisfaction of 7, just over 7. And this agent here had one just over 7 as well, which is good because my top producing agents seem to have higher scores, except this one, I guess. And so anyway, so that gauge visual is very helpful for here as well. Now, how did I get the average customer satisfaction? Well, in here, it's another measure here. You'll see I'm just computing the average of the customer satisfaction score. So that's all I'm doing at the top here. Now, on this particular visual, I have top 15 agents by policies issued, so I wanted to rank them. There are a lot of agents that issue all sorts of policies in our example here, but I only want to look at the top 15. Otherwise, this gets really busy. How did I do that? Well, I'm actually utilizing the filters here, and I don't want the user to be able to, anybody reviewing this report to be able to, change this. And so I, again, have it in my filters, and then it's hidden, the whole filter pane, so they're not able to actually change it anyway. What you could do is you could actually tie this to a slicer, and you can make this a drop down. So maybe if somebody didn't want to see the top 15, they wanted to see the top 5 or maybe the top 25. You could do that with a slicer and then change the values only on here, which is pretty neat. But we'll see here, if I go to my filters, I can actually filter by type. So this is an advanced filter. I can say, hey, show the top 15, and it's going to say, well, top 15 of what? I want to say, well, by the total policies. So it's going to say which agents were associated with issuing the most policies, rank them. And so we'll see here, my top left, I have this top agent, their ID here, 97. They issued 128 policies this year. And then going all the way down here to the right, 119. So it's a pretty tight band between these top 15 as far as how many policies were issued. One of the other neat things that you can do is, let's say you wanted more detail in that you wanted to be able to drill down. Okay, agent 97 here, for example, where are they issuing their policies? And if I click on here, or I right click on it, I can actually do a drill through. And so that's why I have my drill through page here. And so you can easily set these up. If I click it, you'll see agent 97 is showing up here. And you can make this more aesthetically pleasing or not if you want. But drill through allows you to say, hey, I want to click into a particular thing and get more detail. And so this is a great way if you wanted to create other visuals associated solely with agents. For example, you wanted to look at their resident state, maybe their rating in different states, etc. But here we're just looking at the resident state for those that they're selling policies to. And then the count of policy IDs, so we're ranking that. We see Idaho and Washington are kind of tied as far as the amount of policies, but we see our 128 down here for the total. So this person is issuing policies all over the place. So we can go ahead and click our back arrow, which will automatically be put in on the drill through pages. So like I said, these are really helpful to go ahead and create. Clicking back will just bounce me back to where I started. And then again, my y-axis here to reinforce this, hopefully for the last time, including that title on there. So I'm going to go ahead and go in and take that off because I've named my chart well, and so I don't need to have agent ID or the total policies on here. So we'll go ahead and take off both of those titles. Okay. Now we'll see here again we're going to have this smart narrative here at the bottom. And so this smart narrative, I'm using both that and the key influencers. The smart narrative is going to look at everything on here and see, hey, the total policy is the highest for AG 270 at 126, and then followed by agent 97 and 303. Now, hopefully, as you're looking at this, some warning bells are going off saying, oh, that's not right, because we see up here that 97 is actually higher at 128. That's where creating visuals like this, they are subject to error, unfortunately, with how Microsoft uses the AI. They put the AI disclaimers on things. So just to note that as cool as these smart narratives are, they need to be understood with kind of what they're able to show and not show. So sometimes, most of the time, they're actually pretty accurate. But at times, what you might have to do is, let's say if we go ahead and remove this visual, and we come in here and we say, okay, when I create another smart narrative. So we'll go ahead and create this smart narrative on here live together. We're going to do custom. And then now we'll see if it actually updates it. And it looks like it's still producing the same error. And so we could dive in and spend more time looking at why that is, but it's probably not a good use of your time on here. But you'll see here, these things are subject to errors. So it's always good when it comes to any of this AI stuff to double check it. So I know AI is a big buzzword nowadays, and I love it, but it's still one of those things where you need to validate. Now, going to the key influencers here on the right, you'll see, hey, what leads claims to be yes? So I want you to analyze claims, explain only by agent ID. And what we see here is, agent for 448, they're 5.3 times more likely to claim from this agent. So that might lead me to say, well, I want to dive into this agent. Why are policies issued by this agent? Why are they much more likely to claim than the agent's peers? And so this can be a helpful way for you to kind of dive into some agent analysis. And see, hey, are they maybe issuing some bad business, or am I being selected against, for example, through this particular agent? Now, one of the last things I'm going to cover here is a Q&A tab. So this is a really powerful feature in Power BI, and you're going to see why here in a minute. So we walk through all these previous reporting tabs, and we showed several different things that we could slice and dice. But what happens where you have somebody interacting with your report and they just want to see a different analysis? Well, if you without this Q&A feature, what this might end up being is you build this wonderful Power BI report, and then you hear those dreaded words, how can I export this to Excel? And you're like, gosh, like, why do you want to do that? This tool is so great. What are you trying to do that's not in here? And instead of needing to just add that functionality for exporting the data to Excel, you can add the Q&A feature, because this allows individuals to do a little bit more of a deep dive themselves. And so one of the things that you can do is, and you can choose which data goes into this and not into this. You can go ahead and say, first of all, you can add some synonyms. So let's say, well, geez, I want to use the term active policies the same as I would use enforce, because you don't know who is going to query that. And so you can go ahead and click add synonyms, and then you can say, well, when you see enforce, know that that's active policies, for example. Microsoft, the Power BI will automatically try to create some synonyms for you, and it does a pretty good job in there. So for example, the field we have in here called gender, if you type in sex is female, for example, it would understand what you mean. So it's a great way to get natural language kind of querying with your Power BI data. And so if I wanted to say, let's just try one of these to get started, it does this kind of by default. I want to look at top resident states by total policies. So if I go ahead and click that, it's going to say, oh, look at this. Hey, Wisconsin ranks at the top. I can hover over this and see 1,000 policies issued from Wisconsin, which is my home state, actually. And so that's where I was born and raised. I didn't build this into the data set, so I found this kind of be a little funny when I saw this. But you can generate that from the top here. And then, for example, if I wanted to look at a different query here that I have. So let's say, what is the total premium amount by policy type? I have 3 different policy types. I can go ahead and clear this out, and I can ask a different question. Pasting this in, or typing this in here. So what is the total premium amount for policy type? Had a typo there. Okay, good. It underlines it in blue, so it understands what I'm talking about here. So I click that and we see, oh, look at this. Term, which no surprise, we have a lot more policies in this too, is a lot greater. But let's say, you know what, I didn't want to see this as a bar chart. What about as a table? I can just simply type as a table at the top here, hit enter, and then look at that. It translates it into a table for me. And so it'll do a default unless you specify, then it's going to try to return it as a way that you specify in here. So this is a great way to kind of be your catch-all as far as designing different visualizations, or kind of covering for visualizations you didn't create, because it'll allow users to say, hey, I want to maybe look at something a little bit more closely or kind of dive in. And then you don't have to worry as much about hey, can you export this to Excel for me? And so anyway, those are some of the more advanced features within Power BI. Again, we did not cover all of them. There's a ton of different visualizations that you'll see here in the top right that we could easily go through. And so I think that's probably enough for today, as I've hit my time. But I hope this has been a good use of your time. Like I said, there's a lot that I could showcase about Power BI, but kind of in summary, we've seen really how Power BI enhances insurance analytics and could through advanced kind of calculations, interactive insights, AI-powered analytics. We've also seen how AI-powered analytics can be wrong, and so keep that in mind when you're in here. And then also effective storytelling. And so you want to help users when you're designing Power BI to extract the most significant takeaways in the shortest amount of time. And so if you're able to construct something simple, that's not too busy, that's not redundant, I'm confident that you can accomplish that. And then you want to make sure that integrate Power BI into your Actuarial toolkit if it isn't already in there. Again, for more efficient data-driven decisions, proactive risk management, and compelling communications of insights. And so we have several different use cases that we've seen. For example, you can use this for controls monitoring, analyzing reserves that come out of your models. You can use this for experience studies, for underwriting, like we kind of see here with looking at the in-force and with agents and diving into the different states and all that. Really, there's so many possibilities that with the data connections. You can connect them to your Redshift databases, SQL Server, you can connect to SAP if you use that for your financial ledgers and all these other components. So you can really bring a lot of different data together and create some really robust, both executive level reporting, also with just team specific reports that you might want to construct. So hopefully this helped get you a little bit excited with some of the things that you can do in Power BI. It's not too hard of a tool to pick up, especially with so many people understanding Excel. It's very friendly to go kind of from Excel to this as you leverage Power Queries, which are identical in both platforms. Excel formulas work very well in here in the sense of DAX is very similar to them, the sum functions, all that sort of thing. And then don't forget, you can also use powerful tools like ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude and stuff if you're trying to understand DAX formulas or how to write them properly. It can help with that. And then there's also some custom features that you can have kind of turned on, some beta features like this when it comes to DAX Query View, where you can kind of test and evaluate different DAX functions, and it can kind of help you write that. And if you have Copilot enabled through your organization, you can actually tell Copilot what you want to do, and it can write the DAX code for you in here. And so that's also something that you kind of keep in mind as well. But again, I'm out of time now, so I want to thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.